All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of XS Exceed. This is Gearface, as always. Happy to be back. Happy to be learning about a new Exceed character from Snake. Snake is back on the show after a very successful Ryu lesson, back to talk to me about a completely identical character, Ryu in Chaos, well known for being uh, indistinguishable from each other. So, Snake, thank you for coming back on the show. Hopefully, we don't retread too much ground from the Ryu lesson as we talk about this
Yeah,
very similar character.
definitely. Yeah, thanks for having me. And yeah, I'll try to shed light on the differences between the two, but it should be pretty much just the same video,
Yeah, you
but
could really
talking
just
about it.
probably just watch
Yeah,
the Ryu one again, to be honest with you. In case you can't tell,
right.
people, we're joking. This character is a little bit weird, frankly, and we're going to be getting into some of that. There's maybe some misconceptions about the character that we want to dispel, and especially maybe some rules clarifications we can give about some of his jankier effects. Snake's the guy to do it. Super excited to have his expertise on the call. Quick disclaimer before we get started, as always. Number one, we're going to be talking about playing to win on this show. If you are, how do I put this delicately? If you are playing to win and you picked chaos, that's an interesting call on your part. It's not necessarily the wrong call, as Snake can attest. He's been racking up a bit of a win streak with him, but there might be other reasons to play the character. He's got really nice shoes, for example. But we are going to be talking about playing to win on this show, and what playing to win means is, the rules that Snake has found in his strategy that has worked for him, and that doesn't have to be your strategy. And if you don't enjoy the kind of play that Snake is going to be describing, and you want to do some fun things with Chaos instead, and the things that we're describing don't sound fun, please play the way that you want to play. You'll have more fun that way. You'll play longer that way. You'll probably get better in the long run because you'll be enjoying yourself. Um, Number two, we typically are fairly prescriptive on this show. We talk about strategy in kind of absolute terms. You'll probably hear more Snake than me. I'm not an expert, and Snake is. Say things like, always do this, never do this. This is usually the right idea. This is never the right idea. Uh, Take all that stuff with a grain of salt. Snake's more even handed than most people I have on my show and is willing to give some grace to some of the more niche edge cases. But in general, we're going to be talking about things uh, pretty prescriptively. All that with a grain of salt. It's not a solved game, not a solved character, very underplayed character, in fact. So there's a lot more room to develop chaos. And if we get something wrong or if we undervalue something, or if we just do something that is different from the way you play chaos, let us know. I want to hear more about this character from different perspectives, and hopefully we can get a conversation going. Yeah, with
Yeah,
all that said, Snake, take it away. Tell me all about chaos.
sure. Yeah, I mean, we were joking about Ryu and Chaos being similar, but I do like playing Chaos for a similar reason that I like playing Ryu, and it's that there is a lot of freedom and expressiveness with the kit that because of his UA, which we can start out with. So as an action, you can strike, placing your attack in any space face down. Your special and ultra attacks set in a space calculate range from that space. So that leads to a lot of fun things that you can do and a lot of bluffs. Which, if you watched the Ryu video, you'll know that I like my bluffs, and you can do that a lot with Chaos because only your specials and your ultras are going to be calculated from
I
the
see.
attacks that you set.
That doesn't mean that you
Uh,
can't set a
mhm.
normal, but it means that the normal's coming from you.
Right, exactly.
Got it.
hmm
Okay.
So that leads to a lot of mix-ups, fake outs, and just a lot of fun, wacky stuff. So that's kind of a big reason why I like playing Chaos.
Okay.
And then on the flip side, um, kind of the same thing, but it's a gauge cost for the action, and it allows you to advance or retreat one, which gives Chaos a bit more positioning power, which can be very good.
Okay. And before we talk about sort of like the relative utility of his different modes here, just a couple of rules clarification. So first of all, people who aren't familiar with season six, this is an action, which means that you cannot do something like reading into his UA. It also means that you can't do it on your opponent's turn. This is something that you are spending your turn doing. Um,
Right.
So, if you've got mix up in your hand or reading in your hand or something like that, you can't do that into his character ability. But so to describe what you're talking about here, if I got, Ryu on the board and I'm right here or something, and I say, okay, I play, I don't know what these cards do. I'm gonna, eyeball it, right? I
Hmm.
play this here, right? As
Hmm.
my action on my turn, I do this. Uh, and on reveal, it turns out it's this, and it's coming from here, which means that he has to deal with this. But it could also have been this on the board. It could have been assault. And that means
Right.
that assault would come from me and I would charge in like I normally would with assault. Right?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how that works.
Is there
Hmm.
ever any reason then when it is your turn and you don't have a better thing to do, whether it's a normal or a special, is there ever a reason to not use is there ever a reason to strike from hand without his character ability unless you're playing something like mix up or something? Because like it seems like
Right.
the the normals being on the board working as normal
Hmm.
are that's it seems like it's all upside to use his ability.
Right. I would say yes, and there are times that there are times where you wouldn't or you won't use the action to represent other um, sort of threats, because two of those specials actually do something when they're not set in a space. So
Oh, okay.
there are some extra stats that you get for not setting it. So sometimes you actually want to represent um, the special with their not set down stats.
I
Those
see.
two specials being the one that you put down. Where did that one go? Um,
Did I steal it somewhere? Yeah, I
oh, there
did.
we go. Yeah.
Cold reflections over here.
So, so if cold reflection is not set in a space, it's got +2 speed, and that +2 speed can really matter when you're kind of in brawling range. You don't really want to, um, if you want to represent that threat, uh, just by using your action, you're already saying, okay, I'm not using a cold or a 6 speed cold reflection.
At
Uh,
range
you know,
two, right?
mhm. So, or that's your prey is the other one. If it's not set in a space, you have +2 armor. So if you set this, then they don't have to worry about, a 7 effective guarded special.
Okay.
They'll know that, okay, so that's your prey is now just 5 guard if that's what you're using.
And that also would mean then, Snake, that if I'm using my character ability every single time I strike, except for 2 times, then my
Hmm.
opponent is going to look at the one time that I initiate from hand and they're going to go, okay, well, that's either cold reflection or that's your prey because every other time, even when it was a normal, you set it on the board. So I,
Hmm.
I, I do need to be cognizant of the fact that even like these are the only things that actually get a benefit from going from my hand. But the more things that I play from my hand, the more obfuscated, the more masked these two cards get to be, right?
Right. Hmm.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I should sort of mix it up. I should sort of do a couple things from his hand, but mostly some things on the board or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
So, so yeah, it's definitely a good action. But as you said, you can't use it, on after using a boost that would already cause you to strike, which is kind of something that makes it a bit awkward. Um, it makes him a part-time zoner rather than a zoner. You would think that just by looking at this unique ability that you would want to just stay at range 8 and kind of just spam your specials because they work at any range. That sounds like a lot of fun. But the thing about it is, when it comes to your defensive turns, when you can't use this action, you don't actually have any specials that will hit, beyond range 3.
Oh, so
So
if my opponent has a project, so in this matchup, actually,
yeah.
in the Ryu matchup, on my turn, I'm super happy to do this. But
Hmm.
then he plays Hadoken, and I look at my entire kit, and
Yeah.
there's nothing there. I can yeah, I can't do anything, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. So yes. So that's definitely something that you want to look at the matchup and kind of decide: am I going to be trying to go for the immediate back out and play my specials, or am I going to have to brawl a bit before I can start contending in the kind of at the range game, which we can definitely get into strategy in a bit. But yeah, so because of that, sort of the way that works, Chaos is definitely finding himself balancing between staying, close to your opponent, and then away from when the time is right.
Right. That makes sense. And then a little bit on his exceed ability because we mentioned it briefly. And
Hmm.
again, we can talk about, more of this later in the lesson if it's more appropriate there.
Sure.
Um so season 6 characters have a little bit of a different relationship with with their exceed mode and the exceed action than a lot of other characters do, or a lot of characters from
Mhm.
other seasons do. They can flip back and forth. They can play their veil off revert thing to build gauge. Like they have little tricks with their exceed mode. But in
Right.
general, the biggest difference is that uh they can do this, right? They can go back and forth between their exceed modes. How much of Chaos's game plan should be around exceeding and staying in exceed mode? Like what is that a huge benefit to him, or is that something that he only needs to worry about in certain matchups? Like how should we be evaluating that in terms of like our priorities list?
So I would say whenever for exceeding, whenever you have a moment to, I wouldn't exceed from gauge. So I would definitely as chaos. What I mean is by spending a card from gauge to flip. I usually exceed by veiling off.
Right.
If I have a moment to breathe and I can afford to, not have a focus in my hand, uh, then uh, I would do that. Because chaos actually has pretty good uses for gauge. So kind of racking it up, and I guess we can talk. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But Deep Revenants is definitely a gauge threshold, or you want to get up to that 4 gauge to start threatening that, and that can be a big part of the mix-up plan with Chaos. So veiling off allows you to exceed, which this is you've got a good flip side ability, and also allow you to build another gauge by reverting, in case you didn't really need to be on that flip side, and kind of just turbo out your 4 gauge threatening game plan. Um, but as for exceeding to use the ability, if you're already on the flip side, it's definitely really helpful. If you don't need to move and you want to use your character ability, you can just flip back and then use it. I wouldn't say it's something that you stay in for a large part of the game, but it can definitely help with maneuvering and kind of staying in ranges or out of ranges, depending what you need in the moment.
That makes sense. And because like so reverting for season 6 characters allows you to take another action immediately. So you can whenever you're in exceed mode, you have access to this mode.
Hmm.
But in order to get into exceed mode, that does generally take your turn. Like veiling off makes you go gauge positive on your exceed flip, but
Hmm.
doesn't doesn't give you your turn back or anything. So you do kind of have to plan ahead a little bit in order to make use of the ability. You can't really reactively say, "Oh, I need to be able to move now, so I'm going to move now."
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
but
it's more of there's something that I could do with that flip side ability next turn, and I can survive until then with the cards that I have in my hand.
okay.
That's kind of the breathing room that I was talking about, or if that's the situation you're in, then I think veiling off is a good idea.
Okay, and you're using it for sort of like a short time to make use of that ability as you need it, but then you're hoping to revert afterward to have built gauge safely to get ready for deep revenants later in the game. It sounds like.
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. Cool.
Hmm.
All right. Do we
Yeah.
want to get into the kit first? Do we want to talk more kind of like high level strategy stuff? I'm willing to go however you want to go.
I'm down to talk about some of these cards in the kit.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, Start wherever you want to start.
Sure, we can go left to right.
Sure.
So Cold Reflection, if it's not set in a space, +2 speed and push 3. So this is definitely a big card for keeping your opponent at a distance. Um, and pretty good at range 2 if you're playing it from hand, and pretty good at range 4 and on, pretty safe at least, range 4 plus, to keep them out. So at starting positions, you can kind of do something like this if you're playing against a character who you're like, yeah, I mean, they can't do anything if they're pushed all the way to range 6. In this Ryu match, I probably wouldn't do this turn 1. But otherwise, maybe against Zangief, for
Zangief,
that's the
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
You can kind of just do this, get your free gauge, because even if they assault in, uh, this pushes from chaos. So it's
Oh,
not
okay.
like just because they're on the other side of it that they'll be pushed this way. It'll still push from chaos, so they'll try to assault in, and then just get pushed 3 this way.
Gotcha. And when
So
it's coming from you instead, it's not a DP or anything. You're just barely getting it on curve. So it might
yeah.
not be like the strongest defensive option. You are still probably hoping to initiate with this most of the time, unless you're trying to catch something like a sweep or something like that, where you are looking to positional mid speed your way out of a slow.
Mhm. Well,
Um,
I mean, I actually don't mind defending with this because this, even if it's on curve, that mean if they're sending me out, that means they've played a 6 speed or higher
which
move
is
like
probably
cross.
cross, right? And
Yeah, and
that'll
then
move you away anyway. You might not care
yeah,
about that so much.
yeah.
Okay.
You kind of wanted them there probably, and then if
Okay.
they want to be at this range, then you start just doing your special thing, and
Right.
yeah.
Make them
So
make
I
them
actually,
make them come
yeah.
back in instead.
I
Yeah.
do find myself defending with this kind of quite a bit, because I mean, a lot of people will try to call it out. If you're just initiating at range 2, it's either you're crossing out or you're cold reflectioning, and so you're really sad to hit a focus with the special 100%
Right.
because you don't get any damage in, and they don't move, and then you get hit for 4. So
Right.
that's kind of the trick with that. If you're playing it from hand, it's you kind of gotta make that call, or are they gonna hit me with a focus, or do I think I can get away with that?
Right. That makes sense. And also, I mean, I assume that the math changes a little bit if they have a really, really scary speed six special. If you're talking about something like Ken's axe kick or something where they're not necessarily crossing out by playing something at speed six, but among the
Hmm.
normals in general, you're pretty happy if they cross out, so you might not care so much about losing a cold reflection to a cross.
Yeah, yeah,
That makes
that's a
sense.
fair trade if
Okay.
that's what you were going for already.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay.
And then one thing to note is, these specials that don't have a 0 range, they don't hit if they're on, if the opponent is on that space. So another way to dodge this, there are those, cases in some kits where, I mean, in the Ryu matchup, you have the Shoryuken, they might call this out. They crit sure you can close 1 because they're faster, and now cold reflection doesn't hit. So when kind of doing these unique ability specials, you kind of want to actually, when you're doing the whole chaos game plan, a big thing to keep note of is your opponent's movement special or attacks, um, and how they might be able to dodge your stuff. So within the normals, you've got cross, assault, and dive that kind of have them moving. So those you're always going to be thinking about with any matchup. But then you got to start looking at the specials and the ultras that also move your opponent and
Right.
how they might do this, which kind of makes that's why the chip versus chaos matchup is just so
Is real tough.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, at least, I mean, tough to do the stuff that you want to do, which is, hit them with these disjointed attacks, but you can still pull it out. But
Right.
yeah.
And so for the example that you just gave of using cold reflection,
Hmm.
you can set it anywhere. You could,
Yes.
if they have that critical shore you can call out, you could put it here
Hmm.
instead. But then they
Right.
can assault onto it, right? They can do something
Right.
else.
Hmm.
They can get onto it that way. They can do something else
Yeah.
to disable it. But you're at least making it a mix up, right? You're
Hmm.
making them call your bluff that way.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And so, yeah, that's right. Um, you got to really get comfortable with all the potential things that you are that you could be threatening, and really kind of manipulating, hopefully, your opponent to kind of react in certain ways. So yeah, you could even do something like uh, something that I do a lot is like if they don't want to get pushed, I know they don't want to get pushed, or
Oh,
kind of yeah, if you think they're going to use a movement option to at least get closer, just have them walk into a
right.
sweep
And
or
then
a
this
or
this this would come from chaos, but they just walked into your sweep range trying to kind of grappler movement their way past your special, and instead they got clocked for 6.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's a lot of those kind of mix-ups. When I first started playing Chaos, I was doing a lot of like really wacky, unsafe mix-ups. But the ideal situation is where, doing mix-ups where you wouldn't lose much anyway, which kind of makes sense if you think about it. It's kind of obvious, but it's easy to get carried away. I find myself actually, with a lot of Season 6 getting carried away with a lot of those actions and abilities because they grant you a lot of freedom. So like with chaos, you can really do just okay. I'll put my attack here. I don't know why.
Right.
Um,
And because there's nothing that says that you can't, you do it.
yeah,
And then it doesn't
yeah,
work. And then you're like, oh, I probably shouldn't do that. And very
right.
slowly over time, you build up kind of some muscle memory about what you shouldn't do. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
okay. So hopefully we can shortcut that for some people. So cold
Right.
reflection is something that you probably want to put at least near your opponent.
Yeah, I usually put it at range 1 because if they don't have something like the Shoryu, then if they assault, they're kind of screwed. If they cross, they still get hit. I mean, sorry, if they dive, they still get hit, and then if they cross, they're doing what
They're
you
doing what
wanted
you want
them to do.
anyway. And
Mm-hmm.
everybody has those options to move. Not everybody has a close 1 faster than speed 4. A lot of characters
Yeah.
do, but they might have 1
Mm-hmm.
instead of 3 or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Got it. Okay, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the kind of the push away special. And then the boost on it, lie in wait. That's a good one. Um, it's 3 guard, and when this continuous boost is discarded, draw 2. So it's definitely drawing you that 2. So that that includes after a strike when it goes to hits the discard,
Okay, so
it'll
they
draw you a
they
draw.
they tech it. They probably won't, but they tech it. It goes to
Yeah.
discard. You play it. It goes to discard. The only thing, like short of like, doesn't Bang have something that like it goes back to your
Mm-hmm.
hand or something? So short of some
Yeah.
some some weird character specific jank like that, you're getting your plus
Yeah.
2 card, or you're getting your 2 cards come hell or high
Mm-hmm.
water. Okay.
Yep. So pretty good for just I like using it if I'm already at full hand and I'm okay with the board state and I don't want to overdraw. So I kind of just boost this, drop to 7, and I'll be up to 9 after a strike. So
So you won't
get
you won't
options.
you won't discard afterward. And the plus 3
Hmm.
guard, I mean, doesn't seem overwhelmingly strong. Is there anything in
Right.
particular, like it's enough to get through a grasp or a cross, but is there anything
Yeah.
that it particularly synergizes well with in the kit?
I wouldn't say so. I would say it's just there, to take a bit more of a beating if they've got extra power going on. Yeah, to survive quick things depending on your board state. Um, Also pretty good with EXs, right?
Oh, sure.
So,
Yep.
um, yeah, I feel like those are kind of the use cases for this boost. I'd boost it. If I don't think that I'll be wanting to cold reflection anytime soon. And that's kind of a thing that, with while playing chaos, um, you kind of just you really need to be in the moment. So you really need to just have the things that you need, right then and there. Which is kind of something that I've found to be true for like Chaos and Zato, the two kind of disjointed puppeteer characters who don't actually have a puppet on their board. Two characters that I actually have come to really like, although I don't play puppet characters all that much. But you kind of just really need when you have such a weird ability and kind of specials that you can play at weird times and um, weird moments. you kind of just need to have the options that you really need in hand. So change cards is a big thing for both of them, I think. So chaos, I'm changing cards a lot for things I need. Like, okay, I don't need this, I don't need this. So when I boost lion weight, um, I'm probably not in a position where I'm going to be trying to push them for a while. So like in the Ryu matchup, I'm probably going to be boosting this because at least at the beginning, I'm not going to want to deal with
Right.
Hado.
Until
So I'm
Hada
going to want to
goes
stay close.
until they go down or something like that. And
Hmm.
do you have kind of like a mental like a rule of thumb for when you say you're not planning to push them anytime soon? Is that one
Hmm.
turn? Is that two turns? Is that five turns? Like
Yeah.
how far up the 4D chess are we talking about here before you are willing to say like, you know what, I'm just gonna boost this.
Right. I mean, if we're like here, um, there's not much, because the whole idea, this is safe against sweeps and stuff. Here, not so much. When you kind of have them in the corner, it's like I don't think I'm going to be pushing them for any good reason. And from here, it would take quite maybe a couple turns to get in a position where pushing would be good. So yeah, I'd say like I don't know, not in the next 2 or 3 turns.
Okay. And like if
Um,
you don't like see a path in your hand to set it up or something, and you're like, all right, I've got to rely on my opponent doing something that I don't know about yet to make that situation happen, I should probably just boost it then.
yeah,
Okay.
right.
I get
And
you.
it's
I
not
get you.
something that you would really be trying to force to make it happen anyway. There's a lot of other ways to build distance in your kit. So if you're in a position like this, you can just find a different way with your hand, I'm sure,
Sure.
to kind of get that distance
You
going.
just cross out if you needed to. You could
Hmm.
exceed mode, retreat one, cross out, make it totally safe or safer at least.
Hmm.
Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. So that's cold
Yeah.
reflection.
Hmm.
Tell me a
And then
little bit
next we
about
got,
spew
yeah,
out.
few out. So yeah, this as a special, I'd say is um, kind of on. I kind of use it as little as I use repel. Just because it doesn't, it's got its use cases. It's another special that, if you've managed to do the long range game with chaos, might as well kind of throw it out. It's really easy to dodge though. If you're placing either at range 2 or 3, it's kind of suspicious. So they probably are going to call, spew out. But you could be mind gaming them. But yeah, I don't know. It's a 3 speed. It lets you reposition a little bit. It's pretty good. I use it a lot more for the boost. But as for the special, yeah, it's tough. It's like when it's good, when it'll hit, when you think it'll hit, it'll hit. I don't really play this from hand sometime that often. It kind of has a spike feel to it when you play from range 3, because then you kind of can retreat one to avoid, all that range 1 to 3 business. But if they play fast, you're sad, and you don't really want to play that risky, I don't think. So that's just me kind of thinking about this special, but I don't really think about that much, to be honest.
Right.
But
That makes sense. And and
hmm.
the, and the boost, I mean, I've had the what is it? I think Gordeau has a
Mm,
similar or similar boost. Like tactical
yeah.
doesn't need much introduction. It's a very strong boost,
Hmm.
but +1 speed
Yeah.
now, advanced retreat one.
Hmm.
Um, Tell me a little bit about the use cases for this.
Yeah, you like range too, so this you can telegraph quite hard the that you want to cross out by kind of backing out to range 2, getting that +1 speed for that above curve cross. Or if to get out of the corner is also a great use case. Um, it's particularly potent on the flip side because you might move one with it with that boost, and then if they don't do anything, the next turn you get to choose, to be on curve at a different range by moving using your ability, and then kind of I'm here now, and I got +1 speed.
Right.
So I think it's particularly potent on the flip side, but it's just a good repositioning and kind of like somewhat of a stalling situation because I think that's something that Chaos can, values a little bit, which is stalling, getting the cards he needs into his hand, preparing for his plan, his zoning or part-time zoning plan. But
Gotcha.
yeah.
So you're putting this down to buy yourself a little bit of time to do the change cards that you mentioned earlier to maybe scare an opponent away from striking you, saying like I have above curve assault, you've got deal with something to beat that, something like that to scare
Mhm.
them off. If you are going to pay out with this, if you are actually going to strike with the +1 speed, obviously there's tons of things that could be helpful.
Yeah.
EXs are nice. There's
Hmm.
lots of mid speeds that would be beneficial. Is there
Hmm.
anything that like I mean, are there any particular cards in his kit itself that really love that +1 speed, or even the threat implied by the other things that would benefit from the +1 speed, like an assault, that make things in his kit easier to play?
Honestly, not really. Not really with the speed. Sometimes it gets concealed to be kind of at an uncontestable speed. If you have EX conceal plus tactical, that's kind of cool. I feel like conceal maybe gets the most out of all of these. I mean, you do get the 7 speed range to cold reflection just to be safer on defense, but as I mentioned earlier, I'd play it at 6 most of the time anyway,
Right.
at 6 speed. But yeah, I think conceal kind of can sometimes, because getting it up to 3 speed kind of makes some interactions a little funnier on defense. Like they can't initiate with sweep anymore and scare you because you'll at least be able to trade. So if I had to say one of these specials, it would probably be conceal. That gets the most out of it. Out of the ultras, I'd say dissect barrage is pretty good for it because it's a 6 speed at range 2 if you backed up, which is nice. And if they pass, then you get to kind of hit it for free, which we can get into what that does in a bit.
Sure. Sure.
Um, but while we're on this topic, of speed with chaos, I do find that you do kind of want to have those on curve normals as options because of how just slow everything else is. And there's a lot of things in his kit that we'll get to that kind of you want to have the on curve. You want to be fast, and you want because it'll help get you to make things happen. So I do think Chaos cares about speed at least early. Um, uh, and then later on, he can kind of, once he's built up his resources, he can kind of start getting away with more shifty stuff.
Okay. Sounds good. I'm looking forward to the shifty stuff.
Yes, yes.
Uh, Tell me a little bit about Repel. I have heard that this card is a little bit of a ruling nightmare. Uh, are we going to have to, play, get a whole bunch of disclaimers and judges' rulings on this card?
What have you heard about the
I think
anything
the
in
the
specific?
the, the main the main question that I have is I think it's this card. Um, whether it means that so I say I put it here, right? I put it
Yeah.
face down here. It comes up. Can they um can they assault or dive into it? Does it stop them here?
No.
Does it stop them here? And it
Yeah, it
also
stops them
it stops
right
them
there.
from without before they move into the space at all. It doesn't stop them from
Hmm.
moving over it or anything. Okay, so
Right.
it's a big wall in front of them. It's not like this space gets skipped or anything like that.
Right.
Got it.
And
Okay.
that's kind of definitely falls in line with a lot of the stuff in Chaos's kit. You look at it and you're like, "Oh, I'm so excited to use this. I can't wait. I can look at all these things that I can do." And then you realize, "Oh, wait, that's not how it works." And then you kind of get bummed about it.
Right.
Yeah. What's that?
Oh no, I was just agreeing with you.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, the first time I played this special, I was like, okay, I'm going to put it here. They're going to try to assault to dodge whatever else I have, and they're going to land on it. It's going to be awesome. They're going to take 5.
Yeah, so
Uh,
and
I
to
wish that's how it worked.
yeah, to be explicit about what Snake is talking about here, this has a printed range of 0, which means
Hmm.
that if it is denying them range, it cannot hit because they can't walk into it, so they can't get hit by it. If you play it from hand, it can't hit them. So the only way to hit them is by putting it underneath them with your character ability, correct?
Yeah,
Okay. And that
and
that is that is pretty telegraphed because the only other
yes.
thing that's going on that hits at that range is
Hmm.
this, which is a one,
Right.
which is a 1 speed, and you can
Hmm.
advance out of it, right?
Yes. Yeah,
So
you
if you
can you can advance out of it. Yep.
so you put it underneath them. You reveal they played the assault. It doesn't do anything to stop you. You just get clocked.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
what is? Do you ever try to hit with this?
So I personally never try to actually put this under them. I mean, this I guess is, a good reason to be like doing stuff like this, where you telegraph that you're playing repel or that's your prey, but you're actually, coming faster than them with any of their close-in options. Um, I play this as an attack when we're kind of far, I can afford to, and I'm trying to get rid of their movement options because if you put this down, likely they're going to be like, all right, I'm going to try to, dive or, you know, do whatever, and they
And
don't
it,
get
it
to move.
and it stops them. So it's
Hmm.
actually it's not a mix. It's a mix up with assault if you put it underneath them. It's a mix up with like cold reflection or consider the other things that we've talked about so far, where they're trying to get past the thing. This just stops them from moving in.
Hmm.
Okay.
Right. Let's say, someone has a fast dive, so a speed 5, close 3 option. That would totally, or maybe like a close 4. They've got some wacky movement options out there, right? That, some of your specials just won't really be able to deal with. This is a pretty good, like, oh, you're not moving this turn. You're kind of baiting out those really intense movement options that they might have in their kit. So I have found use for repel that way.
Yeah.
But in a matchup with Ryu,
Probably
you
not a
won't
good
find me
idea.
doing this.
Can
Yeah.
you could you
Mhm.
also, I guess, I don't know why you'd want to, but could you also stop them from crossing out?
Uh, yeah,
Or is
yeah,
that
that would work.
is there ever any particular reason to put it behind them that this would obfuscate that? It seems like this is
Does not
absolutely
work.
100% face up. I'm just spitballing
Yeah.
here.
Oh, like any other. Yeah, I mean, honestly, some, conceals. I've had some board states where this kind of works because if they do cross out 1, 2, 3, first
Oh,
of
I
all, they don't
see.
hit you, and then conceal hits.
It still
So
hits.
yeah,
Okay.
there are reasons to place things behind the character.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, so I mean that could be a thing. Yeah, if you really were expecting them to cross and they're going to do it anyway, and you don't want them to kind of go that far,
Yeah.
you definitely do that.
If you're up against somebody who's a better zoner than you are, or like you said, you're a
Hmm.
part-time zoner. You can't zone all the time. So if you
Hmm.
do want to keep them close, I guess that's a possibility.
Right. But that's
Um,
just such a bold move because if they don't, they're not crossing and they just
right.
hit you because this you're
Right.
you're definitely not hitting, and they're
Okay.
probably playing something that will hit you back, and so
Yeah, and
it's just really risky.
generally when you spend your turn to strike, you want to get something out of it. Um,
Yeah.
it seems like honestly, it seems like this card is the use case that you described for it to prevent a move in, to bait something to move in,
Hmm.
is kind of about as good as you're going to
Yeah.
get out of it as an attack.
Yeah. Or the rare instance where you've been doing a great job at well, not rare, but sometimes you do a great job of dwindling their resources. They're low on hand size. Maybe they are actually out of movement options. Then maybe you'll
Yeah,
go for that range 0 repel and, just hope that they don't wild swing into one or, just hope that you actually checkmated them with it. Um, but other than that, yeah, it doesn't see too many plays from me as an attack. I definitely use it a lot for force cost, which Chaos definitely has a few of those in his kit. You know, you'll be there. He's got a couple boosts that cost one force. This is a common card that I use to pitch for that cost. I also include it in any change cards actions that I do. You know, so I might spend from gauge and then some from hand, and repel is definitely one of the first to get out of there.
Right.
If I have to.
Yeah, sometimes having a bad card in your kit doesn't have to be a downside if you have force costs. And I assume that there's literally zero reason to ever play this on defense. Like as a
Yeah,
as a
zero. Yeah,
wild swing from hand ever on defense. That's
right.
not what this card is ever for.
And you know, I
Um,
imagine some people are mulling for the repel to be in their starting hand so that they don't have to wild swing into it. But because of what I mentioned earlier, because I like to play chaos where he's got everything as many things as he could possibly need from at least this turn to the next in his hand. I actually mull out my repels because I just need all the tools that actually work to be in the hand. And I for that reason I do rarely wild swing as chaos unless, you know, as I'm playing, stalling, drawing, I get those repels in my hand and the deck starts you know, to look a little nicer to wild swing into.
right,
But it in terms of mulling it away or mulling for the repels to get into my hand, I don't really think about it. And if I do have repels in my hand, I actually, you know, toss them and try to get
right,
better stuff.
right. But I mean, but Snake, how once you've pitched both of your repels, they're going to have it's there's going to be such an exploitable hole in your kit that your opponent can take advantage of because you'll be out your most important defensive option
Yeah, you got to reshuffle as soon as you lose
as soon as you
both.
lose repels.
Mm-hmm.
There is a boost on this card, compounding
Mm-hmm.
plots. So
Yeah.
plus one power now take another action. This is that season six invented canceling. Um,
Mm-hmm. Without gear.
what is the value of compounding plots?
Um. So yeah. Um. Honestly, in this kit, plus one power doesn't do too much with the specials, which is another interesting thing. You know, like the plus you're asking about, like, okay, we have the plus one speed and the plus one power. Um. Yeah, in terms of like how it affects specials, it doesn't really reach any breakpoints. You know, uh, but you would like attach it to a sweep and then you break other sweeps, so that's nice. So sometimes when you're going for that backbreaking play, could be good to toss that down. Um, I find use for it when I'm kind of trying to do a similar thing to, or when I play lie in wait. Kind of just I don't want to overdraw. So let's say I have six cards, I'll boost compounding plots and then prepare. That's something that I do a lot. Just kind of like, okay, I wanted to prepare anyway. I'm still trying to stall. I'll throw a plus one power and continue my you know, drawing plan.
And so
Um,
that's kind of a way to. It's not quite changing cards with repel, but it's doing a similar
mhm.
effect. You're drawing more cards,
Yeah,
and maybe you get a little bonus out of it. Okay. Um,
yeah.
I guess also you spend a lot of time, maybe sometimes in situations where your opponent can't really hit you back well. So maybe plus one power just to improve how much damage you're doing to them could be valuable. But you're right that you're not hitting any incredibly valuable breakpoints in
Hmm.
situations where those breakpoints would be valuable.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I wouldn't really use this as a kind of get one extra in. It would really just be to get the breakpoints. One other use case though that I do have for with compounding plots is something to do with deep revenants. And I guess we can kind of talk about this if you don't mind kind of going a little bit out of
yeah, not at all.
order. So this is definitely like 80 to 90% of the reason why I play Chaos is this.
Is this card.
Yes, just because it's so fun. To you know, once you've built up the four gauge, you know, then you've got this thing just hanging over their head. This 10 power. No one wants to get hit by this. I mean, people might disrespect it, but still, like, you know, that's just, you know, the psychological aspect of this card is great. Yeah, 10 damage at range four. So you know, once you have four gauge, you start doing, you know, putting stuff down at range four, even if it has nothing to do with that range.
All the
Uh,
time
yeah.
you play whatever from that range and they're like that's deep revenants,
Hmm.
I got to deal with it.
Right, right. And so then you kind of accelerate your game plan of trying to remove their
Their movement.
movement options. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
So right,
yeah.
that's an overarching theme for Chaos for sure is dwindle their movement options. Play things that will make them use them, those options up. So in a situation like this where okay, I have 4 gauge now, I'm threatening this 10 damage ultra. Uh, well, first of all, I don't think I would play it at range 2. So typically, you want to play this at ranges where you're not going to get sent out. So the 2 armor 5 guard is super nice for it, but it'll get spiked at this range if you just go for it. So
Right.
I mean, but you can use that to your advantage, right? You could be playing an assault back here, and you weren't actually deep
Yeah.
revenancing. But anyway,
Make
yeah.
them spend the spike just like you would make them spend a movement option.
Right, exactly. That's
Sure.
kind of so this opens up so many more mix-up options, so that's great. But kind of really quickly, just to get close up the compounding plot situation. Um, the after effect on this card is a huge reason why to play it too, and why you're kind of okay missing it because it is a hard ultra to land because all they have to do is move at least 1 space faster than speed 2,
Right.
which is possible, quite
That's pretty
possible.
easy. Yeah, you have a lot of cards that
Hmm.
can make that happen.
Right. Although, it seems to land a lot when you're at range 1 and then you put it, behind them. Because really from here, you either have to dive, but yeah, I guess the best situation is you're in the corner, so even dive doesn't work. Range 4, they have to cross out. So their options reduce because there are definitely fewer cards that let you back out of a situation. So
Right.
this is kind of like almost the highest possibility chance or highest chance to land it here. Um, but yeah. But yeah, you're totally okay um, uh, missing because you have this draw until you have 7 cards in hand after effect. Um, and I like to play Deep Revenants when in a way where I can kind of use it as a change cards as well. So let's say I have like 6 cards in my hand, and let's say it's a good time to play Deep Revenants. I'll probably be playing Deep Revenants, but I'll be trying to get as many cards out of my hand that I don't need as possible before I do. And there are a few boosts that allow you to do this, one of which is compounding plots. So that's kind of the use for that. It's kind of like, okay, I'm about to play Deep Revenants. Let me just lower my hand size so that it's like I'm changing cards in preparation of Deep Revenancing.
I get you. When you started talking about this, I was still thinking about the +1 power part of compounding plots, and I was like, what breakpoint are you possibly trying to hit? What character haven't I talked to that has like a 10 guard to get through Deep Revenants? Okay,
You
but no,
didn't know
you're
about the 11 power breakpoint?
no, no, I haven't gotten to
Yeah,
that part in the lessons yet, Snake.
yeah.
But really, you're using it as kind of like a preemptive change cards
Hmm.
to get a little bit more economic value out of something that's pretty good anyway. All right, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Okay,
So,
but
yeah,
to go back to repel for a second,
yeah.
pretty much however you play this card, it's involving getting it out of your hand in a way that doesn't that you're not mostly not playing it as an attack unless you're in that
Yeah.
specific situation. It's kind of a dead card.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. That is honestly hats off to you. That is a better set of use cases for this card than I really thought we were going to get out of this lesson. So I'm quite happy with that. That's really cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
I always joke that I always say, best card in the game. But, uh I do use it quite you just kind of it's almost like oops, no, that's my bad.
that's all right.
Just something you got to get used to. Kind of like a pain in the side that you're just like, okay, I'm just dealing with that.
Right. And
Um,
you mentioned that spew out is almost as difficult to use as repel is sometimes. So these are kind of like your
yeah.
dedicated I need to pitch some force cards, it sounds like.
Well, I wouldn't pitch spew out as force. I would
Oh,
try to use it as
tactical.
it's yeah for tactical.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
But
that
in
would
terms of
allow
an
you to maybe
attack,
change
yeah.
that would allow you to change more cards later.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's kind of like the stalling. Kind of doing stalling with power doesn't really it's not gonna change too much. They'll still hit you with whatever they wanted to hit you with last turn, but +1 speed will kind of make them think twice.
Right. All right, that makes sense.
Um, hmm
Okay.
Cool.
Then Let's talk a little bit about
Um,
conceal. It's come up a couple times here.
sure.
We got a speed dodge.
Yeah, speed dodge. So, yeah, people don't like speed dodges. So they'll really this is a card that um people will probably play around a lot and try to bait it out of you. So you'll see a lot of weird plays like, initiating with sweep at like range 3 or range 2, just kind of going slow when you would expect them to go fast because they're respecting this. And it's really punishing if you do get baited out because you'll likely do no damage and you'll be hit with a heavy hitting slow. So I feel like play like the whole conceal game situation is kind of a big deal for how games play out with chaos. It's kind of choosing the right times to play it, and you know the opponent needs to be able to call this card out
Right.
when they think you're going to play it. Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of a situation like if you have a DP in your kit or if you have a command grab like a range one spike like in your kit, like you don't
Hmm.
necessarily play it all the time, but the fact that it's in your kit kind of influences the play patterns in ways that you can exploit. Like just having a
Hmm.
command grab says you can't initiate spike or focus into me or sweep or focus into me the way that you could against any other character, and I can use that.
Hmm.
So conceal is awesome when you can hit with it, but if it's also just going to make your opponent play slow, that's cool too.
Hmm. Yeah. Yep.
Is this something that you tend to respond to or respond with rather? You would respond with this from hand rather than put it on the board?
Yeah, although if we are like range 7, range 8, I don't mind throwing this out. It's not so valuable where, it's like, oh, I gotta save it for the right moment. It's like I'm down to just, get the 5 damage and if it's free. So, if we're, all across the board, or yeah, on other sides of the board,
Sure.
I'll
Gotcha.
throw this out. Yeah. Even
Okay.
if they even if any other special would have done just as fine. Sometimes this is the only one you have, but you got to kind of take those moments and capitalize on them
Right.
because
Five
it's,
damage. 5 damage
mhm,
without your opponent getting gauge back or anything is 5 damage that you got for free.
yeah,
So you take it.
hmm,
Okay, that makes sense.
100%, yeah.
And
Um,
then,
mhm.
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, no, go ahead.
I was actually going to move on to checkmate. So if you
Oh
had
yeah.
more on conceal, please go for it. But otherwise,
Um, Yeah, with conceal, we kind of touched a little bit on how some speed actually, makes it a little bit nicer. Because if you can get it up to 4 speed and you're initiating with it, you are definitely getting damage in no matter what.
right,
Because you win the speed tie for speed 4, and if they're speed higher than you, a higher speed than that, then they miss. So that's something. That's why kind of speed attacked onto it can be pretty good for sure. Um, other than that, yeah, that's kind of about it.
makes sense.
And then yeah, and then checkmate. That's a card that you kind of really only use for that exact situation for checkmates. So when you so yeah, you spend 2 force. It costs 2 force, but you're discarding you know all the cards in your hand save for one. And then you're adding +4 power on it. So this is for moments, and I've had a couple of those where it's like, oh, they literally can't do anything. It's a game-ending thing, right?
Right.
Most of the time. So, all right, this is enough power that will kill them, and they actually can't do anything about it, and it's just GG. Um, I have used it a couple times, not in that kind of situation, just to get that extra damage to maybe play some catch up. Um, and I would say it's most worth you know tacked onto like an assault, or if you just didn't have that many cards in your hand to begin with and you just are looking for a powerful hit, but you got to make sure your odds are pretty good that you'll make the most of it, because
Right.
if they just block, then that kind of sucks. But yeah, I tack it onto an assault because then you can kind of reload, and if you had resources in your gauge, then you can just change cards and it's like nothing happened. So um, that's kind of why that's one other case why chaos needs resources engage for those big CC moments. Yeah, Other than that, it's kind of exactly what it says it is. It's a checkmate boost.
It's a checkmate. You're using it to close out a game. And when you mention assault, obviously, like you look at their kit, you say, okay, they don't have anything above curve at range 3, so my assault is safe. And also their cross is down because I really, really don't want to whiff with
Right.
this.
Yeah. You don't want to. Yeah. If they got crosses up, yeah. You don't. It's like a last ditch effort. It's definitely like a. It could be a Hail Mary boost for sure. Or just yeah. I say assault. Yeah, because you get that advantage, and you don't give the turn back, and you can kind of build up your hand before they can
Before they,
capitalize
yeah,
you on you
if you
having no cards.
if you failed to kill them, you have put
Mm-hmm.
yourself in a very bad position because, as we established, your wild swings aren't very good. So
Right.
you do need that opportunity to reload after you use it. That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also can't help but notice, not advocating for this, but maybe I
Mm-hmm.
would like to advocate for this.
Mm-hmm.
Checkmate into Deep Revenants. If you're looking for an awesome way to get all the cards out of your hand so you can draw a lot of new cards,
Right. Mm-hmm.
that seems pretty fun.
Yeah.
Is
Definitely.
that
If yeah. Mm-hmm.
is that even a little bit practical, or is that just fun?
Um, I just don't find myself in at range 4 that often.
Mm.
Kind of just like at the end of the opponent's turn. Uh,
Oh,
but yeah.
it's one of those. It's like just defense. It's like mix up. It's not a it's a then strike.
Yes.
You can't use your character ability.
Right.
Ah,
Hmm. So you would have to
that
be at range 4 to be able to do this with deep
that
resonance.
that sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
forget
Yeah,
everything I
definitely.
said. That was
It
cool.
would be pretty powerful though if you could do that, more often than just whenever you're at range 4. Just I mean, it's definitely a good combo. Because that plays into that sort of CC before we use deep revenants.
Right, right.
The other thing to make sure about with this is just remember you can't do EXs with it because you're discarding until you have one. So if you have this plan where you're
True.
like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna just checkmate +4 and then EX, let's do this.
Right. So,
You
uh,
just got the one card.
unless you've got like superior down already, and then it's not a
Right.
surprise. So that thing I was mentioning before about like make sure their cross is down. If they still have a cross up,
Hmm.
you can't EX assault. You need to be hitting with one card here unless you've got
Hmm.
superior down. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. That
Um,
makes sense. And then that's your prey is our final special.
yeah. So yeah, this is a good one. This is a good special for brawly chaos when you're up in their business, trying not to get into zoning territory because maybe they've got something good at range. If it's not set in a space, it's got that +2 armor, which it actually gets a delta that's a little better than focus. So it's definitely focus like. The one downside is that they can move you. So you kind of do feel a little bad when if the opponent grasps, calls out that's your prey when you're setting it, and they grasp you, and now you can't hit because they push you too. Even though you just took one, this is a pretty high value card, I'd say, on both sides. You don't really want to just throw it away for nothing. So you want to play this when you're sure that you're going to trade kind of slows probably, or they might assault into you, or you're okay with a sweep into this. Um, at least when you're playing from hand. Uh, so that you just want to make sure of that. As for like setting it with your unique ability, definitely when you're on other ends of the board, you could do something like the issue with this one though is I find myself baiting with it more often. So right, if I place it here, it doesn't hit if they don't move, but I'm just expecting them to move in some way. Maybe I'm threatening spew out,
Right.
and so they're trying to, assault into it, or maybe I'm threatening cold
Right.
reflection and they're trying to assault
Cold
into it.
reflection, they're assaulting it, or if you're looking for
Yeah,
that sure you can play, you're trying to filter out their annoying one
right.
space of movement thing. You put it right in front of them and
Hmm.
get them that way.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, rarely do I actually do this because then I
Right.
get no damage. This is the greedy play. This is if you kind of really think that they don't have any movement options. Even this kind of because they might dive over. This I feel like I guess it's, if they call that you're not really doing anything, or if they just block, then this does nothing. But I'd still throw it out. It really depends. So a lot of these kind of calls with these specials is going to depend on what movement options that they have left, and whether or not you think they might have them in their hand. So it's up to you. But this does hit from range 0 to 1, so that means here, here, and here. So definitely the single special that has the most coverage. Um, and yeah,
And pretty high upside when you hit. I mean, even if honestly, even if you whiff with the get into land on the space uh gambit, 5 damage is five
yeah,
damage. You're cool with that.
yeah,
Um and in this position in particular, you're probably not getting hit back if that's what you're going for.
yeah,
And obviously like if they have a big scary projectile, this actually lets you trade up on the Hadoken.
hmm
If they're not moving at all, you put it right here. They move in, cool, you got them. They didn't move in. They threw a projectile instead. You still probably trade it up. So
yeah,
you're not miserable if that happens, but you are trying to bait out movement options in general, right?
right,
Okay, that
yep.
makes sense. Um, and then what about Umbral?
So this is a pretty key boost in the kit, I think, because you can do a lot of positioning stuff with this. And what's nice is it's got that take another action clause, which means yippee, we get to use our front side ability with it.
So
Um,
it's not a now strike; it's a take another action that you will probably use to strike.
Yes, yeah. This is kind of the same feel as Scramble, where it's like you're definitely not just gonna leave Scramble up and not strike. You're gonna
Right.
Scramble, cancel, strike. This one you're gonna play the boost and you're likely gonna use your ability to strike right after. So it's got that after effect. If your attack was set in a space, advance or retreat to that space. So you're typically gonna play this with normals because where you would want to place them and where you would want to advance or retreat to is probably away from the opponent if it's the right time.
Oh, and this
So,
would let you hit them still.
yeah,
But so you could place it at the very far end of the board. You're still playing the same sweep, and the sweep is still coming from you. And the after effect means that you won't move until after you hit.
right. So you can definitely, yeah, the common play is, you do it with grasp because it's, on curve and you're like, you get to even push them further and then you're
And
out.
then you just dip. Okay.
Yeah. But you can also do stuff like put a sweep just to ensure it, and then even if you get hit and you're slow, whatever, you'll still go back here. But yeah, so and in rare, instances, you could also, let's say someone's super good at zoning, loves range 8, you could kind of just maybe play something
You block and come in or something. You
yeah,
or
block come in,
you
or
grasp and
even
come
like
in.
a special, like hit with one of your specials, and like if you're playing against like uh, I don't know, like LTS, the Sagat thing, like
Oh,
you don't want
sure,
to be
sure,
at range
sure.
8. You're just like, okay, they're slow anyway. They're not going to hit me with that. I mean, obviously, if you go fast and then you come after, they can respond with like a sweep and still hit you. But maybe that's a trade that you're willing to make, or willing to take, just to get back into a range where you can actually do stuff.
Right.
Um,
And that I
so
mean
yeah.
that is we talk about force efficient movement being like you know, air dash, where you got three spaces of movement on one card. This
Mm,
is two force for yes spaces of movement, however much you want.
yeah.
All right, so that's that, and during a strike too. So that seems very strong.
Yeah, no, it's
Okay,
definitely so this is yeah, really good repositioning when you're ready to kind of make some big movement plays.
okay, and to go back to the thing that you were saying a while ago about playing kind of in the moment with what you've got. Umbral
Yeah.
is for when you need to get away. That's your prey is for when you are already away and are ready to start zoning well and using your game plan.
But also
Okay.
if you're really close, because I'm using this at range 1 when I need it. Right?
Right.
If we're brawling at range one, and I'm thinking, oh, he's going to be sweeping. Oh, they're going to be playing like 7 power attacks. Like your Potenkin at range one, you're going to be hitting me with 7. This acts as another focus, pretty much. Like, okay,
Right. Okay.
I'll take 7 damage worth of stuff and still hit you back.
So if you have a handful of focuses and sweeps and a grasp or something like that, Umbral is doing nothing for you, and that's your prey is actually going to keep you right where you want to be. Umbral is
Hmm.
for when you have this in your hand and also conceal and repel, not repel, and
Hmm.
cold reflection and maybe spew out and your other
Sure.
uh, payout options.
Right.
Got
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Hmm. And this also plays into a couple other things. One thing being the speed thing I was talking about with Chaos, where it's like you definitely, if you're not uh that's why I like to keep on curve things, because this is an after. So for it to be sure to go off, I want to make sure that I can at least get my attack off. This is good with like assault. So assault is actually really good on chaos for a lot of reasons, and I mentioned a couple before, and this is one of them. Where if you go umbral and then you're like assault, then you come in, you back all the way out, you've got
You've
advantage,
got
and
advantage. You
then you
hit
can
them.
start doing stuff. Yeah.
You've hit them and probably dodged their counterattack because you were still playing it on curve, and now you can
Yeah.
start your offense. Okay, so yeah, that
Right.
that that is a very very strong. You don't give your opponent an opportunity to close any of that distance before you're already on them and running your game plan.
Hmm. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah. And then also this plays into the deep revenant strat, where that's just more cards you can get out of your hand too. If you're like, yeah, I don't need That's Your Prayer Umbral, and also I'm gonna pitch, I don't know, a grasp because I'm not gonna be in that range. And then, so that's 2 cards out of your hand, and then you can play deep. And then let's say you also had repel, then you just got 3 cards out of your hand before you deep revenants. 3 cards that you probably, didn't
Yeah.
need.
And, or
Uh,
or or for some of them for That's Your Prey for Umbral, you got good use out of them before you pitched them. It wasn't like you were just getting it out of your hand for Deep Revenants, but it was a
well,
nice
well,
a
this
nice
is
upside.
right. Well, this is what I'm saying is you're doing this right before playing Deep Revenant. So this is
Right.
something you can do to kind of lower that hand size, and then you literally will Deep Revenants right after. So let's say
Right, right.
a Deep Revenants turn would be, I've got 4 cards in hand, and let's say, okay, I won't be at a range where I think I'll be using these anyway. So I'm gonna why did I put this in your hand? So I'll do this, I'll do this,
Yep.
and then I'll do
And
this.
and I'll disappear to the other side of the board. I'll get +1 power, but really I'm just taking stuff out of my hand.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's stuff that I like to do as long as it makes sense to. Like if I think that I'll need this card soon, then I'll opt not to do that and just it's just the same reason why you would take a change cards action, keep the stuff that you want and get rid of the stuff you don't want.
Right. That makes
Um,
sense.
hmm so yeah, that's another use case for that. So yeah, that's that card. And
I
yeah.
assume as we've been talking here, we've sort of been like it seems like we've been sort of almost climbing up the power levels. Not exactly. Like we started out
Hmm.
talking about some okay cards, and then we got into some cards that maybe aren't so great. But when we're
Right.
talking about changing cards and the things that you are digging specifically for,
Yeah.
it seems like Umbral and maybe the stuff that we're about to be talking about are your targets for those change cards. You're looking for like your really really big options, not just like answers for your current situation. Are you looking for are you I guess
Yeah.
are you changing cards for your game plan, or are you changing
Mhm.
cards to like respond to a threat?
Honestly, yeah, when I mentioned kind of like living moment to moment, it's really just, yeah, what threats are up now? How can I survive until later, until I build up? And yeah, like sometimes I'll have deep revenants like, early, or dissect barrage, or some of those like cards that we're talking about, like even like, That's Your Prey. But sometimes I'll pitch them because I don't need them right now. And that's
Right.
something that you can do, and you have a second copy. So like with some of these, like Deep Revenants, you don't really need two to do the big thing that you want to do. So sometimes you're okay being like, okay, I'll pitch this for whatever I needed to pitch it for, maybe change cards, and then I'll get the next one later. Because this is really only good once you're at 4 um, gauge. I mean, the boost is good too, but that's also a case by case basis. You need to be in the right position for that. So yeah, to answer your question, it's kind of a I am leaning more towards the uh, like, all right, what do we have to do to win the strike now? And then the rest kind of falls into place later.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm not like CCing for the big stuff in advance. Just
And
what
and
I
you,
need now.
and you're not, and you might be CCing for the stuff that will get you the gauge you need for the big stuff later.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think a good early game plan for chaos is racking up that gauge, which is why that the on curve stuff is important. Um, kind of yeah, and that's why Umbral is really good too. Or I mean, not Umbral. Uh, Chaos Code, which we'll talk about, but just stuff that will get you gauge. Veil off and then reverting, all that kind of stuff. You definitely want to build up that gauge so that you can start doing a lot more stuff. You want that resource bank, and then you also want to start threatening that deep revenants.
Right. That makes sense. Okay. And then
Mhm.
as we talk about the ultras in general here, so Chaos is a season 6 character. They have a reputation for kind of printing a lot of gauge. And we're
Yeah,
prioritizing gauge, and partially we're prioritizing gauge for that deep revenance. But
yeah.
is this the kind of thing where we are, we're hitting with we're getting to 4 gauge, and that's probably like as high as the gauge is gonna climb? Or is Chaos the kind of character who by the end of a game has generated and spent 7 or 8 gauge? Like how much what's our budget, I guess I should ask.
Um, if you're not deep revenancing like right now, you can spend that gauge. You're gonna spend your gauge for changing cards. You're gonna spend it for moving. Um, so whenever I think about, okay, I need to move now, uh, what do I spend? It would be, I guess priority would be, all right. You're okay. So when you're spending from gauge, I would say kind of always keep like 2-ish, unless I guess keep as many as you think you'd be using for like if for the ultras. So if you think you're going to be dissect barraging a bit soon, which we'll talk about use cases for that, go down to, and you have like 4 gauge, then go down to 2 gauge, and then maybe start spending from hand if you need more. And in terms of targets for pitching, obviously we got repel, and then any normals or specials that you don't think you'll be using in that moment.
In the next couple
Oh,
turns, right? So
yes,
I
exactly.
so I guess my question, like that's how you that's how you generate, that's how you cash out your budget, right? I guess what
Yeah.
I'm wondering is, um overall, is he the
Hmm.
kind of character who builds who over the course of a game, is he building 4 or 5 gauge? Is he generating 4 or 5 gauge, or is he generating like 10? How much of
Uh,
how much of a
yeah.
of an investment is one deep revenance to him? Because there are some characters who are like, yeah, I can spend 4 gauge on an ultra. That's not a big deal. And then there are other characters who are
Oh, I
like,
see.
I've worked my entire life to get this 4 gauge. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's I'd say it's not too. I guess it's like in the middle. It's like you get like one deep rev. You can probably land like two deep revenances in a game, and you maybe have been spending your gauge for other stuff. I wouldn't describe chaos as someone who generates it out the wazoo, but then I wouldn't say that like it's so hard to get 4. Um, I don't know. It's just kind of comfy.
Okay,
Uh,
that works. And
yeah,
just so as we're,
yeah.
yeah, no, I mean the reason I'm asking is just so as we talk about the ultras, I can kind of
Hmm.
put them in the context of like, all right, so 2 gauge for some characters is super cheap. 2 gauge for some characters is a
Yeah.
little bit expensive. It sounds like he's kind of in the middle.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, 2 is not that expensive. I guess, yeah, I think Chaos does. I guess when I'm thinking about like Cold Reflection, right? Like it's 2 damage. It, I mean, the game's. I guess you're striking a lot. At least when I play Chaos, you're striking a lot. and you're doing stuff like Cold Reflection, which doesn't do that much damage, or not much in the way of like ending the game anytime soon,
Right.
via like the life, you know, the HP going down to 0. But it gets you that gauge, it gets you that positioning. So kind of a lot of small hits, and when you're doing like the Umble Grasp. So I feel like yeah, your gauge definitely ends up getting a few of those like crosses, grasps, those like kind of like really quick hitting things. So you kind of do rack up more than you realize. Um, and yeah, for playing Dissect Barrage, if it's good, it's good. If you're at 2, you don't really have to worry about like, oh shoot, but I've been saving up for Deep Revenants, because once again, it's like you got to do what's good in the moment. And so
Gotcha.
oftentimes with the Dissect Barrage, which I guess is the next ultra we're talking about,
Yeah, let's get into it.
um, calculate range from chaos, even if this was set in a space. So it's the only attack in a skit that does this, where you can set it anywhere, but it'll, much like a normal, calculate from chaos. Uh, and then the after is, if it was set in a space, you get to advance or retreat to that. So that's another repositioning tool that Chaos has, and a pretty good mix-up tool because of this, because they don't want you going all the way over here. So when you start doing something like this, and you have 2 gauge, so that's the thing. I mean, I was talking about a 4 gauge threat, but building up gauge to 2 already unlocks. So there's like 2 sort of thresholds for unlocking your the mix potentials, and 2 is the first one with that ult, and then 4 is the ultimate with the ultimate threshold with 4 gauge.
Right.
But for Dissect Barrage, yeah, you are threatening something, which is the ability to reposition, and a pretty decent shape. So when you do something like this, they're scared. They're probably going to play fast to interrupt, because that's what you're threatening. So
Right.
that's something that you can kind of mix up with a little bit.
They're never going to spike you if you or they're going to it's going to be a really hard call out if they spike you here.
Mm-hmm.
So you
Yeah.
sweep them, you focus them, you do something with one
Yeah.
of your you
Yeah.
even if they're going to play fast, you play conceal.
Yeah. You could. Yeah. You could. Well, here's the thing: if you played Conceal there, then it actually calculates
Oh,
from there. So it's
it'll
actually
actually come from there. That's right.
right. Yeah. So when you're mixing up with it, you're gonna want to do it with a normal.
Right.
And the best, good normals to do that with are if you're at range 1, fast ones are pretty good too. Just grasp, pretend like you're gonna move all the way over here, I mean, yeah, and they might respond with a grasp or a cross at this range, and then you just kind of stuff their
Right.
attempts to
J-
stuff your barrage.
because I mean, just like again, it's just like with a command grab or with something else. Like the threat of this will make them play to stop it, and they're like, it's not that big a deal if I lose to a grasp, and then they lose to a grasp, and then they lose to another
Hmm.
grasp because you still got this thing for later, and then they lost to a
Yeah.
cross because they've run out of both of those, and now you can play this for free later on because they've run out of fast options.
Right. Hmm.
I get you. Okay.
Yeah. So definitely a good attack, and you can when you have 4 gauge, you can really go start threatening that deep reference with it. They're gonna try to do the dive, maybe. Or yeah, in this situation, probably a dive, but then you just kind of back out.
Right, and you've
And
stunned their dive. You hit them with a mid speed. You deal some damage.
hmm Yeah, so it's really
Okay.
good. I've also used it defensively when I'm sussing out spikes. Got that nice 5 power to kind of call out spikes if you're feeling it. And I found it worth, even if I'm like, okay, they might be playing something faster, or they might be assaulting in 2 gauge. Yeah, I guess kind of going back to that, gauge question. Like, I'm okay with throwing this out sometimes, even if it's just maybe not going to work. Um, but yeah, it's good.
Gotcha. All right, and like as we're talking about these now, we've
Hmm.
at least mentioned both ultras. We have a little bit more to talk about for Deep Revenants. I see what you mean about like you reach a gauge threshold and suddenly your character just activates. Now you can do things. Right? Now
Yeah,
you can threaten mix-ups with it like a mix-up is cool. A mix-up that is so threatening that it makes your opponent play in a way that is exploitable is especially cool. And now you have those things. They're just locked behind some gauge walls.
yeah. I mean, you have many versions of those, which we talked about, but yeah, these are the like big boy ones where it's like,
Right.
okay, now we're talking serious.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's why we're gunning for the gauge to threaten these. Gotcha.
Yeah.
What
Yes.
about aerial leap?
So yeah, that's a good repositioning boost as well. It's got the may strike clause at the end, so you can't latch
Can't
your
use your character
action onto
ability.
it.
Right. Right.
hmm But yeah, I mean, Advanced Four is really nice. Kind of like if you're in that zoner matchup where they do have better stuff than you, then you can just kind of get in there with that.
Right.
Um, Definitely something I'm all for if it is that kind of matchup where you're gonna have to stick to them like glue.
Right. I guess
Um,
it's also a way to get out of the corner and sort of keep the middle of the
mhm,
board if you need to. So it's
right.
flexible.
Yeah, and you it's a you may strike, so you don't have to if you don't have anything good in your hand. You could just use it purely as a movement tool and just
As a
pass and draw.
get away from them, right? And like you said, you're
Yeah.
playing these things flexibly based on what you need in the moment, and nothing is so important that you won't prioritize it in the short term. So you're okay with playing
hmm
this even if you need dissect barrage for something else.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
we talked a little bit already about deep revenants, the attack.
Yes.
Anything else you want to mention about the attack before we talk about chaos code?
Um, yeah, I guess just when playing it, biggest thing to look out for is just make sure they can't stun it, because once again, the half of the reason you're playing it is for that redraw, that reload.
Right.
So it really sucks though if you get stuffed. So you want to be really careful with that. Kind of be aware of the elbows, those range one, ignore armor range or ignore armor and guard.
Yep.
Be careful of the spikes. Uh, but yeah, definitely definitely scary and very fun if you can land them for sure.
And the threat of it makes everything else you've got kind of much scarier too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then chaos
Yes. Yeah.
code. Now strike, placing your attack in any space face down. If you reveal a normal attack, calculate range from that space. So it's the opposite of your character ability.
Yeah. Yep. Now you get to play normals with your ability. Yeah. This is a super useful. More useful if you manage to get the range on them. Because normals usually work range 1 to 3 anyway. So
Right.
you're kind of
Right.
using this when you're far away, and you kind of want to just hit them with stuff. One kind of obvious one is with grasp, right? So if you chaos code and then you grasp them here, that's like a super fast version of cold reflection.
Right.
Doesn't push as much, but it makes it
But
quite a sure shot.
yeah, and I mean in terms of what you're trying to dodge, even a range 2 grasp frequently gives you a lot of mileage by dodging sweep and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Adding something else on top of it, adding a little bit more spacing on top of it gives you a lot of positioning control.
hmm
Um it also seems like, as you mentioned, some of your big scary threats aren't how should I put this? Some of your specials are not big scary damage numbers. Your normals might
hmm
be. So is this
Right.
also just
Yeah.
a way to get a lot of damage?
100%. Yeah, I definitely. It's either grasp to get the positioning if that's more important, or if the positioning's already there, sweep is
You
obviously a
sweep
really
them.
nice. Yeah.
How does it work if, let's say, we have something like this? I put chaos code down. I'm all the way over here, and I put dive
hmm
in the space. I
hmm
reveal it. I advance 4. Sorry, I advance
Perfect.
3, and then because I'm at range 1 from dive hits.
Yeah.
I don't have the advance doesn't matter really. It's
hmm
just where I put the card.
Right.
Okay, so before effects don't, I don't have to put the dive here and then the card will advance 4.
Right.
That's
Right.
not
Right.
how it
Yeah.
works. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
hmm
And that's,
So yeah.
I might not want to do that because then I'm giving my opponent space. I'm moving in on them and I might not want to be. So, prefer to do your big spike or something or
hmm
sweep or
Yeah. It's
grasp
not
them
the best.
to get a lot of to get a lot of push onto them.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And dive is kind of you want to save your dive. I find myself you got to boost reading.
Right.
You know. Chaos can use every edge he can. He'll use every edge he can take, and reading is definitely can help him get that edge. Assault though is a good one because yeah, you're advancing, but you get that
You get
that,
advantage. Okay.
and then you can do whatever. But yeah, I mean, normal's super good. I mean, you could also do some weird plays like a spike at range one with Chaos Code. Um, just place it here. They would have to cross out to kind of dive over.
Right.
Um, but depending on the situation, once again. So a lot of these are just case by case, but just know kind of all the options you've got, which you got plenty with this kit. Um, but yeah, that's a good boost.
Okay, cool. And that's the kit. That really does sound like a lot of his power budget is kind of uh in these cards and how they and both the boost and the card itself. But he does have a
Mhm.
couple of other spicy things hidden in his kit. Um
Yeah,
any considerations about the normals and the normal boost? You've mentioned assault being
yeah,
very, very strong a couple times. Obviously, cross is a way to get away. We've heard
yeah.
about some use cases for some other ones. What about the normal boosts? Do you find yourself valuing one side of a normal more than the other, or at
Yeah.
least differently than another character would?
Yeah, it's a good question. These, yeah, let's see. So yeah, cross, obviously, if you are trying to get away, as cross is good for, usually good for.
Yep.
But once again, I'm boosting that superior is really good. I mean, it's just good in general, but it's also sometimes you can brawl at range one, and boosting superior helps. And you will be needing to brawl at range one in some matchups. So that's another situation, and that's kind of why cross and cold reflection, they're like really close siblings, where it's like if you're not going to use them for the same use that they kind of have, then you're fine kind of boosting them
Right. Right.
um, wherever you're at. So that's kind of a situation by situation basis. I find Spike. So Spike's a mix-up card, but we just talked about so many mix-ups, and so Spike as an attack is not really a mix-up that I take often with Chaos because there's just so many other ways to do it. So I kind and I say mix-up a lot, and the boost is called mix-up, so I can see how that might be confusing.
Right.
But the that's a that's a good boost. I'd be probably boosting it a bit more with Chaos, just to get the positioning a little bit right. Although, like we said, we can't really attach the action onto it. But this lets you kind of back up to range two to cross if you need it, or range one to keep the brawling going. Because
Yep.
while you're stalling, when you're doing the brawling stuff for a lot of characters, and you're trying to stall to get those cards that you need, you want to stay in the safe ranges, and typically range one is going to keep you safe because you don't have spike to just blow through your defenses.
Right.
Because if you have stuff like focus or that's your prey or sweeps and you're just ready to go, you want to kind of hug them. So spike is pretty, or mix up is pretty good on spike to get to stay kind of close, and it gets you that draw. So that's exactly the kind of thing that you want. It's you're striking, you're staying at range one, and you're getting to cycle through your deck a little bit. So that's a great boost for chaos.
Makes
Um,
sense.
but when a spike is good and you feel it in your loins, then that's the time to do it. So I'm not gonna say don't spike, but
but
you gotta
but
feel it.
you have a good use case for mix up right there, and it'll
Hmm.
often come up. So Spike needs to
Yeah.
make a pretty strong case for itself too.
Yep.
Gotcha. That
Exactly.
makes sense.
And then for grasp, so like I said, the staying on curve is important. So I think having your grasp up is really important as well. Obviously, Chaos loves to reposition, and so that boost is going to be really tempting. And there are times to use it. And when you're keeping the pressure up and you want them to strike into you, obviously that's when respect is at its best. But if you needed to move to range, or if you needed to close in or whatever, to range one or something, and it didn't matter if, yeah, and it doesn't matter if you get the draw to, or if you think they're probably going to strike anyway because you're not really representing anything crazy. I feel like you just air dash. So if I
Right.
had to choose between the two boosts, I'm air dashing more often. Even though we just said assault is good, if you're going to be at range one, just keep the on curve thing that is applying to your range. And if you're closing into range one, you want the grass to be your on curve range thing. So I find myself, if I had these two cards in my hand and I know I'm going to be brawling at range one, I'm going to air dash. Um, that's my choice, unless depends on the circumstance again. But
Right.
that's
Of
kind of
course.
the way I think about that. And but yeah, and then as for assault, I'm definitely sad when both are down. So if I did air dash at turn one, I'll be looking to hit with the other one somehow.
Right.
Um,
And you've mentioned a lot of different situations where that assault can be very, very useful. A lot of boost setups, a lot of mix up setups where you're getting a lot out of it.
hmm Yeah, exactly. So you definitely want to keep at least one up. And as for kind of just on that same topic, when we talk about reshuffling, because I realize we haven't talked about that in terms of like cards that you really value, and if both go to your discard pile, which you would like to reshuffle.
Mm.
I feel like Conceal is definitely one of the ones that you kind of do auto reshuffle if you have two in the, because it's definitely one of those cards where it's like I look at it, I'm like, I'm not even going to be playing it that much, just because like oftentimes they're respecting it, but you kind of just reshuffle because you want them to get back on
Respect it.
that,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
respect your game. In fact, I kind of, not to give away a secret or anything, but I do mull these out of my hand at the start of the game. It
Right.
just
So
gets to that level where it's just like, they're not going to try to get hit by this for a bit, so I'm not going to need this at range, like on the first 2 to 7 turns.
right.
Um,
Don't
so
worry. Don't worry too much about giving too much away because they will still be afraid that after your first turn you drew it.
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
the
true.
fear the fear is still there as long as it's in your deck.
True enough. Yeah, exactly.
And
So
and do
yeah,
you find yourself reshuffling as chaos pretty much every game because you're changing cards so often and being so free with your
yeah.
force? Okay.
Yeah, and sometimes if the time is right, if you're kind of low on deck anyway, kind of see through the deck happens a lot too.
Okay.
Just change cards through the deck. But yeah, reshuffling. So because you're going to be, with our game plan that we have, because you're getting so many cards in your gauge, because you want that bank of resources, you do want to make sure that before you reshuffle that you've spent these, so that you've got all these high value cards that you need back in your deck.
Right.
So one way or another, and that's kind of another reason for Deep Revenants. It's like, oh shoot, low deck cards engaged that I need back in the deck. I'm just gonna throw it out,
Oh,
and
so I'm gonna make sure everything is back in my chamber so I can or back in the ammo depot so I can get it
mhm,
back later and keep on fighting.
right,
If I hit with it, awesome. But
hmm
stuff in gauge is not going to be reshuffled, and that might be a problem depending on what's in there.
right. And by
Getcha.
that time
Okay.
in the game, you've probably done a great job of dwindling their resources. So you're probably definitely scary.
You might be able to hit with deep revenants, and this might be the time to do it.
Yeah. hmm
Okay. And if you whiff, well, good time to reshuffle anyway. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Cool. 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 That makes sense. And
Um,
we got
yeah,
these last four normals to talk about.
right. So block is good because when you're brawling and sometimes they've got some power and scary things, you can block, and you like the gauge, so that's super cool. And if they've got some high value boosts, you just tech hit. So good card all around. Kind of the same as just any other character. Why you might use block.
Right.
Um,
A lot.
yeah,
A
nothing
lot
too
of
special.
a lot of characters are pretty willing to spend block as force as well. Is that something that you find yourself doing a lot?
No, you kind of need that protection just because you are the part-time zoner, so you don't have like a fully dedicated like good stuff at any certain range. So you kind of need this for those kind of caught out moments.
Right. Okay.
Um, so I don't find myself pitching this for force at all, just because you want that gauge. It's like kind of a nice free gauge, defensive gauge, plus uh, you know, yeah, an extra defensive card in case you need that extra defense.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you're going to be crutching on these pretty hard because,
Hmm.
as we've established, he seems pretty bad on defense. So you want
Hmm.
these. Gotcha.
Right.
Okay. And then I assume the same can be said. Not a lot needs to be said about sweep and focus as attacks, probably. They're notorious.
Hmm.
They're very, very strong. We've talked a
Yeah.
little bit about Veil Off and when you would use that to build gauge, to
Hmm.
exceed, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
The more we've been talking, the more it seems like it's really there for gauge generation and less for your exceed side.
Um. Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Definitely. Yeah, because there's never a situation where like I'm like, oh, this is a matchup where I'm gonna be going flip and I'm gonna have to be really using my flip side thing. Yeah, it's
Right.
not really that. It's only ever consideration that flip side for like, oh, there's this cool thing I can do next turn if they don't really let me,
Right.
if they don't really change much about the board state. So yeah.
and
Hmm.
and then I can revert. I got two gauge. I got dissect barrage online. I got deep revenants online.
Right.
Um, okay, and
Because yeah, more
but
often. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask, because focus is so good as a defensive card. How often do you really find yourself doing that?
Honestly, Uh, once again, just like if I already have other defensive options that can do the job just fine, and I can breathe, I have a moment to just breathe and do it, I'll
Right.
do it.
Okay.
Because it could maybe get me to a gauge threshold. It'll get me to be a little more flexible with my next action, my next unique action, and I can defend with something else. That's fine. So yeah, it really depends on the moment. But if you know you're going to be at range one for a while and you have two or three and you're like, I'm going to need that focus, then you make that judgment call. But uh, yeah, I do like those moments where I get to do it because that's I think a pretty big um, advancement in the game plan.
Right. That makes sense because
Uh,
you are valuing that gauge so highly. You've already
hmm.
mentioned reading being particularly strong. Do you find
Yeah.
yourself playing dive very often?
Only if I am trying to get to range one and I'm just like, yeah, I mean it's a good attack and it's got a lot of mix up with the kit, so range four, am I diving or am I deep revenancing? Um, so they might dive out of the way to deep revenants, but I'm actually diving at your face
You're
and
diving
trying
in,
to.
right? So
Hmm.
and maybe it's not coming from the not coming from the board, it's coming from you, kind of thing. That makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it's got both sides are pretty good. I having a good reading play though can really shift the tides.
Especially
Um,
because you're spending so much time dwindling your opponent's options. It sounds like you can
mhm.
probably get some pretty high, high accuracy readings off.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yep.
And then how about just defense?
Honestly, not a boost that I boost often, and it doesn't really synergize with too much in the kit. Like, yeah, not really. I can only think of like end game scenarios where you just don't want to, you just need to do a little bit more damage, and you just don't want to take that much before
Right.
you do that damage.
You got three life. If you play sweep, you're gonna die. You might as
Hmm.
well get some armor so you have something to crutch on.
Yeah,
Makes
exactly.
sense.
Yeah, no
Makes
special
sense.
use cases in this kit.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
And so then those are the normals and their boosts. I feel like we covered that. We covered the kit pretty well. Unless you've got anything else to mention, I got one more question for you about counterplay.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so you've described all the chaos things. I feel like one big way that the opponent can stop chaos is to just punch him in the face. But what is how is my opponent stopping me from doing all of my stuff? And what can I do to make sure that their attempts to stop me fail?
Um, good question. A good question. So,
We've talked about it a little bit already. I feel like because
yeah.
some of the stuff you're saying about even just being a part time zoner,
Hmm.
if you could be, you would be a full time zoner. But your
Yeah.
opponents are just going to be like, I walk into you and now we have to fight. So
Right.
like even just the fact like being willing to brawl sounds like
Yeah.
one of your answers to chaos counterplay. Like you need to use these tools because your opponent will make you use them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think. Yeah. Definitely. right? So like kind of getting in because when we're brawling here, yeah, definitely. I feel like do it. The opponent should do it on their own terms. So, and make those calls. So yeah, like Chaos hates it when you grasp his. That's your prey. A lot of his, range one defensive options are going to be pretty call outy unless they're normals. Just play a good fundamental game in that case. But other than that, kind of, um, yeah, make the calls and be kind of, I would say, kind of. Um, don't play too risky with the hard reads though, especially with the like your movement attacks. Kind of play them. Think twice about um, uh, playing them willy nilly, because you might need to make the harder calls in the late game once he's kind of built up.
Right, and if
Uh,
you've already spent all of your movement abilities and you've left yourself open to deep revenants, I hope you got a lot of value out of those movement abilities.
right. Yeah.
Right,
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
get
I
you.
guess just prepare for that. Prepare for that late game. Like kind of Chaos might want to trade with you in the early, and just make sure that you're getting those good trades in, and then just get ready for the mix up city at the end by
Right, and
having
then
a plethora of movement options.
and then as chaos, then my job is to note that they're doing that. They're holding their mix up options or their movement options. They're holding their stuff for the late game. That means that they might not be willing to play them in the early game. I can use that information. I can change up what I'm doing in the moment as I'm advancing my game plan.
Hmm.
Um, so that's kind of the conversation is that Chaos wants the gauge. Chaos wants to build his unstoppable end game. He wants to get rid of his opponent's options. His opponent wants to keep those options. Now we're now we're fighting.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay, I get you. Interesting. So
Yeah.
I have to say, and like I think I get the game plan. I think you've done your job on the show here, Snake. This was an excellent lesson. I
Thank
get
you.
why people think he's frankly not super good. I get that. But he definitely has some spice. I definitely can tell that he has a little bit of jank hiding here and there in his kit that you might have to dodge around as a new player. But he does not
Mhm.
sound unplayable to me the way that I have heard people talk about him as being unplayable. So, people who are watching this at home, if you like his vibe, if you like his aesthetic, maybe don't get too turned off by everybody talking about how he's a garbage character. Because if you've been in the community, you've probably heard that as his reputation. He seems kind of fun. He seems like he's got some good stuff going on. Um,
Yeah.
Certainly, I'm more excited to try him now than I was before we started the lesson. So, Snake, thank you for being an advocate for this guy because I don't think too many other people are stepping up to the plate to defend him, and you did a great job doing it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad to have done it. Yeah, definitely one thing I'll say is, a lot of these things in this kit will make you go, um, oh, look at, I want to do all this cool stuff, but oh wait, that's not how it works. But the obstacle to overcome is sort of playing the kit enough and realizing the stuff that you can do, and then those things, once you kind of internalize them, you'll realize you have quite a bit to work with. So definitely play around with it. There's a lot to mess around with, um, and yeah, be creative.
Right, and you're probably it kind of sounds like you're going to go out there and lose a couple of your first games, just as you're
Yeah.
finding your feet with this guy. He seems like has some easily exploitable weaknesses that are actually pretty tough to patch up without some pretty good experience under your belt. So maybe shouldn't be your very first succeed character unless you are committed to liking his vibe, which is fine. But
Yeah.
as you get better, you will, as Snake did, you will find some stuff that he can do that is actually worth doing. Which sounds exciting. That seems like a fun project character. So
Yeah.
Snake, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. I always like talking to you. But this especially has been wonderful. You've gone from teaching me about the character I probably knew the most about and the character I was most excited for, to a character that I had no expectations of liking. And you did great on both. So hats off to you. You did wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I love being on this show. It's a lot of fun and can't wait until the next video.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And everybody watching at home, hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. Go try out Chaos. Have a good day. Thank you for your time and your attention, and I'll see you all for the next one. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye bye.